The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October, and I knew before opening it that my life in Mountain Ridge, Colorado, was about to get a whole lot more complicated. My name is Vincent Lawson, and I have been running a volunteer search and rescue operation from my property for the past 8 years. The 5-acre plot sits at the edge of our development, backing up against federal wilderness land that stretches for miles into the Rockies. When hikers get lost or skiers go missing, my equipment and expertise are often the difference between life and death. The shed housing my snowmobiles, rescue sleds, and emergency gear has saved 17 lives over the years. The HOA wanted it gone. I stood in my driveway, still in my paramedic uniform from the night shift at County General, reading the notice with growing disbelief. The letter was signed by Patricia Montgomery, the newly elected president of the Mountain Ridge HOA, and it cited Section 14.7 of the Community Guidelines regarding outbuildings. According to Patricia, my equipment shed violated the aesthetic standards of our neighborhood and needed to be removed within 30 days, or I would face daily fines of $500. The shed was not some eyesore. I had built it myself 3 years ago after the old one collapsed under heavy snow. It was a professional-grade structure, painted to match my house, with proper insulation and electricity. Inside were 2 ski-doo snowmobiles specially equipped for rescue operations, a rescue sled, medical supplies, climbing gear, and communication equipment. The county sheriff's office had my number on speed dial during winter months. I called Patricia that afternoon. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice crisp and businesslike. Montgomery residence. Mrs. Montgomery, this is Vincent Lawson from 847 Cascade Drive. I just received your letter about my equipment shed. Ah, yes, Mr. Lawson. I'm glad you're calling to discuss compliance. I'm calling to discuss why this is suddenly an issue. The shed has been there for 3 years without complaint. The previous board was lax in enforcement, Patricia said. I'm implementing proper standards. Your shed is visible from Cascade Drive and violates our community aesthetic guidelines. It needs to go. That shed houses emergency rescue equipment. I'm a volunteer with County Search and Rescue. When people go missing in the wilderness behind our development, I'm one of the first responders. That's very noble, Mr. Lawson, but it doesn't exempt you from HOA regulations. Perhaps you could store your equipment elsewhere. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. The whole point is rapid response. When someone is dying from hypothermia or buried in an avalanche, every minute counts. I need immediate access to my equipment. I'm sure you can work something out. The decision is final. 30 days, Mr. Lawson. Have a pleasant day. She hung up before I could respond. I immediately started making calls. First to my lawyer, Tom Brennan, who had handled the closing on my house. He looked over the HOA documents and confirmed my worst fears. Vincent, I hate to say this, but they're technically within their rights. When you signed the HOA agreement, you agreed to follow their architectural guidelines. There's a provision about outbuildings requiring pre-approval. I got approval from the board when I built it. Do you have that in writing? I searched through my files that evening but came up empty. The approval had been verbal, given at a board meeting by the previous president, Harold Chen. Harold had been enthusiastic about the rescue operation, even calling me a community asset. But Harold had moved to Arizona 6 months ago to be closer to his grandchildren. Next, I contacted the county sheriff's office. Deputy Chief Margaret Rourke was not happy. Are they serious? Vincent, you're one of our best volunteers. Last winter alone, you helped rescue those college kids who got lost on Mount Harrison. I remember. 20 below zero, 3 in the morning. Exactly. Tell your HOA that your work serves a critical public safety function. I tried that approach at the next HOA meeting, which was held in the community center on a chilly Thursday evening. About 40 residents attended, mostly retirees and a few younger families. Patricia sat at the head table with the 4 other board members, looking every bit the middle manager she apparently was at her day job. She was maybe 55, with short blonde hair styled in that particular way that screamed suburban authority, and wore a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. When the floor opened for resident comments, I stood up. I'm Vincent Lawson, and I'm here about the removal order for my equipment shed. I want the community to understand what's at stake. That building houses search and rescue equipment that has saved 17 lives in the 8 years I have lived here. Just last March, I pulled a family of 4 out of their overturned SUV in a snowstorm. In January, I found an elderly man with dementia who wandered from his care facility. The county relies on my rapid response capability. A few residents nodded. I recognized some of them from neighborhood gatherings. Patricia cleared her throat. Mr. Lawson, we all appreciate your community service. However, rules exist for a reason. Our property values depend on maintaining consistent aesthetic standards. Your shed is an industrial-looking building that's visible from the street. It's painted the exact same color as my house and barely visible through the trees. It's visible enough that multiple residents have complained. Multiple residents. Can you name them? Patricia's mouth tightened. Complaints can be submitted anonymously. So one complaint then, maybe yours. A few scattered laughs rippled through the audience. Mr. Lawson, you're out of order. The board has voted and the decision stands. You have 3 weeks remaining to comply. I sat down, frustrated but not finished. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me with support. Bob Sanders, a retired firefighter from 2 streets over, shook my hand vigorously. This is garbage, Vincent, pure power trip. Patricia's been on a rampage since she took over, sending violation notices left and right. She cited me for having my trash cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours. Can we recall the board? Take signatures from 30% of homeowners and 90 days notice. She knows nobody has the energy for that fight. But I had an idea forming. If the HOA wanted to play by the rules, I would follow them to the letter. The next morning, I called Deputy Chief Rourke again. Margaret, what would happen if I wasn't available for search and rescue this winter? We would have to rely on the team from Jefferson County. They're good, but they are an hour away in ideal conditions. In bad weather could be 2 hours or more. Why? Just planning ahead. I spent that weekend documenting everything. I photographed the shed from every angle, took measurements, compiled records of every rescue operation I had conducted. I also printed out the section of our HOA documents that Patricia was using as justification and read it carefully. The language was specific about permanent structures and outbuildings that alter the aesthetic character of the community. But it said nothing about temporary structures. On Monday morning, I called a contractor friend named Steve who owed me a favor after I pulled his daughter out of a backcountry skiing accident 2 years ago. Steve, I need a very specific job done and I need it done fast. Name it. I need my equipment shed made completely mobile. Mobile. Vincent, that thing is bolted to a concrete pad. That's the point. If it's not a permanent structure, it's not a violation. Can you retrofit it with a trailer frame and wheels? Steve was quiet for a moment, then laughed. You're messing with your HOA, aren't you? Following the rules exactly as written. I love it. Give me 5 days. While Steve worked on the shed conversion, I prepared the next phase. I contacted every homeowner whose life I had directly impacted through search and rescue. The Hendersons, whose daughter I found when she went missing during a camping trip. The Kowalskis, whose son broke his leg hiking and would have died from exposure without rapid response. The Taylors, who I pulled from that overturned SUV. By Wednesday evening, I had commitments from 12 families to attend the next HOA meeting. I also reached out to the local news. A reporter named Jessica Chen from Denver's Channel 7 was very interested in the story. "So let me get this straight," Jessica said when we spoke on the phone. "Your HOA is forcing you to remove rescue equipment, and this could impact emergency response times by an hour or more in winter conditions, maybe 2 hours if the weather is really bad, and they don't care. They care more about aesthetics than safety. When's your deadline?" 2 weeks from Friday. "Mind if we send a crew out?" I was hoping you would ask. Steve finished the shed conversion on Thursday afternoon. The structure now sat on a heavy-duty trailer frame with commercial-grade wheels. It looked exactly the same from the outside, but technically, it was now a mobile unit rather than a permanent structure. Steve even installed a hitching mechanism so I could tow it with my truck if needed. "This is probably the most expensive loophole I have ever built," Steve said, wiping his hands on a rag. "But it's beautiful. Thing could survive a hurricane and still roll away." I paid Steve double his estimate and bought him dinner besides. The next HOA meeting was on a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks before my deadline. I arrived early and was pleasantly surprised to find the community center packed. All 12 families I had contacted were there, plus about 30 other residents. Bob Sanders gave me a thumbs up from the back row. Jessica Chen and her cameraman were set up in the corner, filming as people entered. Patricia looked distinctly uncomfortable when she noticed the press. The meeting started with standard business: approval of last month's minutes, treasurer's report, discussion of holiday decoration guidelines. Patricia tried to rush through it, but residents kept asking detailed questions, dragging things out. Finally, we reached open comments. I stood up first. "I'm here to inform the board that I have complied with your order regarding my shed. It is no longer a permanent structure and therefore not in violation of Section 14.7. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me. The shed is now mounted on a mobile trailer frame. It's not a permanent structure, so the violation notice is moot. That's a technicality. It's the actual rule as written, unless you want to claim my parked trailer is a violation." Patricia shuffled papers. "We'll need to review this with our attorney. Take your time. While you do that, these residents would like to speak." One by one, the families stood up and told their stories. Sarah Henderson spoke about the 3 terrified hours when her daughter was missing in the wilderness, and how I found her before hypothermia set in. Mark Taylor described being trapped in his overturned SUV with his wife and 2 kids in a blizzard, watching their phone batteries die, thinking they might freeze to death before help arrived. Then my headlights appeared through the snow. "Vincent reached us in 20 minutes, Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. "The county said regular emergency services were delayed by weather and would have taken at least 2 more hours. My youngest daughter was already showing signs of hypothermia. 20 minutes versus 2 hours. That's the difference we're talking about." Patricia's face was red. "This is very moving, but it doesn't change HOA regulations." That's when Margaret Rourke stood up. I had not realized she was there. She was in uniform, which added weight to her presence. "I'm Deputy Chief Margaret Rourke with the County Sheriff's Office. I want this community to understand something very clearly. Mountain Ridge backs up against thousands of acres of wilderness. We get dozens of search and rescue calls from this area every year. Vincent Lawson's rapid response capability has been instrumental in saving lives. If his response time is compromised, people will die. Not might die, will die. Deputy Chief, we appreciate law enforcement's perspective, Patricia said, but the HOA has to maintain property values for all residents. Property values. Margaret's tone was sharp. What do you think happens to property values when headlines read about hikers freezing to death, while rescue equipment sat in a storage unit across town because the HOA cared more about aesthetics than safety? The room erupted in applause. Patricia banged her gavel. Order. This meeting will come to order. Jessica Chen stepped forward with her microphone. Mrs. Montgomery, Jessica Chen, Channel 7 News. Can you explain to our viewers why the HOA prioritizes appearance over life-saving emergency services? We're not. That's not what this is about. This is about following established rules that all homeowners agreed to. But Mr. Lawson's shed has been there for 3 years. Why take action now? Previous enforcement was inconsistent. So you're admitting this is a personal enforcement decision rather than a consistent policy. That's not what I said. This meeting is for residents only. Press needs to leave. This is a public community space, Jessica countered. We have every right to be here. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Residents were shouting questions at the board. Patricia and the other board members huddled together, whispering urgently. Finally, Patricia banged her gavel again. The board will take this matter under advisement and issue a decision within 2 weeks. This meeting is adjourned. She practically ran out of the room. The news story aired that Friday evening. Jessica did an excellent job, showing footage of my rescue equipment, interviewing families I had helped, and contrasting Patricia's rigid stance against the clear public safety need. The story went viral locally, getting picked up by other Denver stations and the local papers. My phone did not stop ringing. Neighbors called to express support. The mayor's office reached out to ask if they could help. I even got a call from a state assemblyman who wanted to discuss legislation preventing HOAs from interfering with emergency services. But Patricia Montgomery doubled down. The new letter arrived the following Wednesday. The board had reviewed my mobile structure and determined it still violated HOA guidelines because it was semi-permanently positioned on my property. I had 7 days to remove it entirely from the premises or face the $500 daily fine. I called Tom Brennan again. Can they do this? It's shaky ground, but they're claiming the positioning of the trailer still constitutes a violation. You could fight it in court, but that would take months and cost thousands. So they can just move the goalposts whenever they want. Technically, the HOA has broad authority over community standards. You'd have to prove they're being arbitrary and capricious, which is a high bar. Vincent, this might be a fight you cannot win. I sat in my living room that evening, looking out at the shed that had become the center of this ridiculous controversy. Inside were tools that had saved lives, equipment that served the community in the most literal sense possible. And Patricia Montgomery wanted it gone because it offended her aesthetic sensibilities. Fine. If she wanted it gone, I would make it gone. And then we would see what happened. I started making calls, first to the county to officially suspend my volunteer rescue status. Margaret Rourke tried to talk me out of it. Vincent, you're emotional. Don't make decisions you'll regret. I'm not being emotional. I'm being practical. The HOA will fine me $500 a day if I keep the shed on my property. I can't afford that. So the shed goes and the equipment goes with it. Where will you store it? I don't know yet, but it won't be here, which means I can't do rapid response anymore. Next, I called the local news stations again. All of them wanted interviews. I scheduled them for Saturday, 2 days before the HOA's deadline. Saturday morning, my driveway looked like a media circus. 3 TV crews, 2 newspaper reporters, and a photographer from the Denver Post. Jessica Chen was there too, having followed the story from the beginning. I stood next to my shed, the rescue equipment visible through the open doors. 8 years ago, I moved to Mountain Ridge specifically because of its location next to wilderness areas. I wanted to be able to serve my community through search and rescue work. This equipment has saved 17 lives. But the HOA has decided that a shed painted to match my house is more offensive than the possibility of people dying in the mountains behind our neighborhood. So I'm complying with their demands. As of Monday, this equipment will be removed and placed in storage. Where will you store it? Jessica asked. I've rented a unit in Morrison, about 45 minutes away in good weather. In winter conditions with snow and ice, it could take 90 minutes to retrieve my equipment and get to a rescue site. That's compared to the current 5 minutes. Have you heard from the HOA? Radio silence since their last letter. What do you hope happens now? I looked directly at the camera. I hope nobody gets hurt because the HOA cared more about appearances than safety. But statistics say we'll have multiple search and rescue calls this winter. Some of them will be life-threatening emergencies where response time is critical. And now, those response times are extended by over an hour. I'll let the board explain that to the families involved. The interviews ran on every evening news broadcast in Denver that Saturday and Sunday. The story gained national attention too, getting picked up by CNN and Fox News as an example of HOA overreach. My phone exploded with messages from across the country. Patricia Montgomery called me Sunday evening. Her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Mr. Lawson, your media circus is creating a hostile environment in this community. I'm simply answering questions about the impact of the board's decision. You're making us look like villains. I'm stating facts. The board demanded I remove my rescue equipment. I'm complying. The fact that this makes you look bad suggests maybe the decision itself is bad. The board stands by its decision. We'll see you at the community meeting Thursday night. And Mr. Lawson, if that shed is not gone by Monday evening, the fines begin. Monday morning, Steve brought a commercial truck and we carefully loaded the shed onto it. Neighbors came out to watch, many of them in tears. Sarah Henderson brought her daughter, the one I had rescued. Thank you for everything you've done, Sarah said. I'm sorry it ended this way. It's not over yet, I told her. Sometimes you have to let people see the consequences of their choices. The shed went into storage in Morrison, along with all my equipment. That evening, I took photos of my empty property and emailed them to Patricia with a simple message. Compliant as of 6 p.m., November 18th. She never replied. Winter came early that year. We got our first significant snowfall the weekend after Thanksgiving. 10 inches of heavy powder that made the mountains look beautiful and treacherous. I spent Saturday morning shoveling my driveway, watching the peaks in the distance, thinking about how many people would venture into that wilderness unprepared. The call came Sunday afternoon. I was watching football when my cell phone rang with Margaret Rourke's number. Vincent, we've got a situation. 2 hikers overdue on the Mount Harrison Trail. Weather's deteriorating. Can you respond? Margaret, you know I can't. My equipment is in storage. How long would it take you to get it? 90 minutes minimum in this weather, probably closer to 2 hours. Silence. Then, Jefferson County team is responding, but they're dealing with a multi-car accident on Highway 285. They're at least 2.5 hours out. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. I hung up feeling sick. 2 people were out there in the cold, and I was sitting in my warm house because of a property dispute. The weather got worse as the afternoon wore on, snow falling heavily, wind picking up. I tracked the rescue operation on my police scanner. The Jefferson County team finally reached the trailhead 3 hours after the initial call. By then, the trail was nearly impassable. They found the hikers 4 hours after that, suffering from moderate hypothermia but alive. They got lucky. The temperature had stayed just above the truly dangerous zone, and the hikers had done the smart thing and built a shelter while waiting for rescue. But it had been close. Way too close. The news covered the rescue Monday morning, and they interviewed me about how my response would have been different. I explained that I could have been on the trail within 20 minutes of the call, reaching the hikers probably an hour or more before they developed hypothermia symptoms. But your HOA considers their aesthetic guidelines more important than cutting rescue response times, the reporter asked. You'd have to ask them that. Patricia Montgomery did not comment for the news story, neither did any other board members, but the community was furious. My email inbox filled with messages from neighbors expressing outrage. A petition started circulating to recall the entire HOA board. The December HOA meeting was standing room only. Someone had rented a bigger space at the community center to accommodate the crowd. Over 100 residents showed up, and the mood was angry. Patricia tried to maintain control, but she had lost the room before the meeting even started. During open comments, resident after resident stood up to condemn the board's decision. Bob Sanders spoke with the authority of his 30 years as a firefighter. I've seen people die because help arrived 5 minutes too late. 5 minutes. The board's decision added over an hour to response times. This isn't about property values or aesthetic guidelines. This is about life and death, and the board made the wrong choice. Patricia's face was pinched and pale. The board followed established procedures and regulations. Then the regulations are wrong. Someone shouted from the back. We have to maintain standards. Standards that kill people. The meeting devolved into shouting. Patricia adjourned early, fleeing with the other board members while residents jeered. The recall petition gained steam. Within 2 weeks, organizers had signatures from 40% of homeowners. The special election was scheduled for late February, but I knew that was too late. Winter was just beginning, and the mountains behind our development were unforgiving. I started keeping detailed logs of every search and rescue call in the area, noting response times and outcomes. In the 3 weeks after my equipment went into storage, there were 6 callouts. None resulted in deaths, but 2 involved serious injuries that could have been prevented with faster response. One case particularly haunted me. A teenage boy had gone snowboarding in closed backcountry areas and triggered a small avalanche. He was partially buried when his friends found him and called 911. The Jefferson County team took 2 hours to arrive because of road conditions. By the time they extracted him, he had been buried for nearly 3 hours. He survived but suffered severe frostbite, losing 3 toes and parts of 2 fingers. I could have been there in 20 minutes. Would have been there in 20 minutes if my equipment had been accessible. The boy's family lived 3 streets over from me. His name was Derek Oakes, 17 years old, a senior at Mountain Ridge High School with a scholarship to play soccer at Colorado State. The frostbite injuries ended his athletic career. His mother, Danielle Oakes, knocked on my door 2 days after Derek came home from the hospital. She was maybe 40 with dark hair and exhausted eyes. "Mr. Lawson, I'm not here to blame you," she said. "I know why you couldn't respond. I signed the recall petition and I've been at every board meeting. I just wanted you to know that I understand. Derek understands too. This isn't your fault. It feels like my fault. It's the HOA's fault. Patricia Montgomery's fault specifically. Derek is going to recover, but his soccer career is over. And that woman cares more about how your shed looks than about kids like my son. After Danielle left, I made a decision. I called Tom Brennan. Tom, I want to sue the HOA. On what grounds? Negligence. Reckless endangerment. Whatever applies. Their actions directly resulted in delayed emergency response that caused preventable injuries. Tom was quiet for a long moment. That's a tough case to make. The HOA was enforcing their legitimate rules. Rules that any reasonable person would see are harmful when applied to emergency equipment. The problem is HOAs have broad discretion. We'd have to prove malice or gross negligence. What if I can prove Patricia Montgomery knew the consequences and didn't care? Do you have evidence of that? I have the letters she sent me. I have her statements at board meetings. I have her refusing to comment when the press asked about rescue response times. That shows knowledge and indifference. It's still a stretch. This would be expensive and time-consuming. Tom, a kid lost his toes because I couldn't reach him in time. How many more people need to get hurt? Let me research Colorado HOA law and get back to you. While Tom worked on the legal angle, winter intensified. January brought heavy snowfall, and the backcountry was particularly dangerous. Avalanche warnings went out almost weekly. The sheriff's office was overwhelmed with rescue calls. I felt helpless, listening to the scanner, knowing I could help but couldn't. Every call was a reminder of what Patricia Montgomery's stubbornness had cost the community. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Saturday in mid-January, temperature well below zero, wind chill making it even worse. A family of 5 had gone snowshoeing on a marked trail but got disoriented in a sudden whiteout. They called 911 at 2 p.m., reporting that they were lost, cold, and their youngest child was not responding well to the conditions. The youngest child was 6 years old. Margaret Rourke called me directly. Vincent, I know you can't respond, but I need to tell you what we're dealing with. Family of 5, including 3 kids aged 6, 9, and 11. The 6-year-old is showing signs of hypothermia. Jefferson County is responding, but they're dealing with multiple incidents because of the weather. Earliest they can get there is 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. Margaret, you know I want to help. I know, I'm just keeping you informed. The family is the Prathers. They live in Mountain Ridge, your HOA. My blood ran cold. The Prathers lived 4 houses down from me. I saw them at neighborhood gatherings. The kids sold Girl Scout cookies at my door. Give me the coordinates, I said. Vincent, you can't. The HOA will fine you. The HOA can go to hell. Give me the coordinates. I wrote down the location and hung up. Then I called Steve. Steve, I need my equipment, now. Vincent, it's a 2-hour round trip in this weather. A 6-year-old is dying. I don't care if it takes 4 hours. Get me my equipment. While Steve drove to Morrison, I prepared everything else I would need. Cold weather gear, backup supplies, communication equipment. I called Margaret back. I'm responding. Steve is getting my equipment from storage. Tell the family to shelter in place and conserve energy. I'll be there as soon as I can. The HOA is going to bury you in fines. Let them try. Steve made the round trip in 90 minutes, driving like a maniac through dangerous conditions. The shed was still on the trailer, so we just parked it in my driveway and unloaded the snowmobile. Neighbors came out to watch, and when they realized what was happening, several of them offered to help. Bob Sanders, the retired firefighter, grabbed gear without asking. I'm coming with you. We loaded the rescue sled and were moving within 15 minutes of the equipment arriving. The ride into the wilderness was brutal. Visibility was maybe 20 feet in the blowing snow, and the cold was savage. But I knew these trails, had ridden them hundreds of times. We found the Prather family 40 minutes after leaving my house. They were huddled together under an emergency blanket they had been smart enough to bring, but little Emma Prather was in bad shape. Her lips were blue and she was barely conscious. Bob and I worked fast. We got Emma into a sleeping bag with chemical heating pads, gave her warm fluids, checked the rest of the family. Everyone else was cold but stable. We loaded Emma and her mother onto the rescue sled and led the rest of the family back on snowshoes. We reached the trailhead an hour later. Ambulances were waiting. The paramedics took Emma immediately, and I heard one of them say, "Another 30 minutes and we would have lost her." Mr. Prather grabbed me, tears freezing on his cheeks. "You saved our daughter. Thank you, thank you." I just nodded, too cold and too emotional to speak. The rescue made national news. Not just local this time, but CNN, MSNBC, Fox, all the major networks. The story was too perfect. HOA forces volunteer to remove rescue equipment. Volunteer defies them to save dying child from his own neighborhood. The press descended on Mountain Ridge like locusts. Patricia Montgomery's house had cameras outside it constantly. She stopped answering her door or taking calls. The other board members resigned in the face of public pressure, but Patricia stubbornly held on. As promised, the HOA sent me a violation notice. $500 per day, starting from the date I brought my equipment back. Within a week, the fine was $3,500. I did not pay it. Instead, Tom Brennan filed a lawsuit. "I've been researching Colorado HOA law," Tom said when we met at his office. "There's an interesting precedent from a case in 2019. An HOA tried to prevent a resident from installing a security system after a break-in. The court ruled that HOAs cannot enforce rules that create obvious safety hazards or prevent reasonable safety measures. I think we can argue your rescue operation falls under that protection." What are our chances? Better than I thought initially, especially after the Prather rescue. We can argue the HOA's actions directly endangered lives. Plus, the public sentiment is entirely on your side. If this goes to trial, no jury will side with the HOA. The lawsuit got filed in February. I sued the HOA for declaratory relief, asking the court to rule that my rescue equipment shed was a protected safety measure. And I also sued Patricia Montgomery personally for negligence and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Patricia responded through her lawyer, claiming she was just enforcing legitimate HOA rules and couldn't be held personally liable. But Tom had done his homework. He subpoenaed emails and documents from the HOA, and what we found was damning. Patricia had received dozens of emails from residents supporting my rescue operation. She had been personally informed by the sheriff's office about the public safety implications, and in an email to another board member, she had written, "I don't care about his sob stories. Rules are rules, and he doesn't get special treatment." That email became the centerpiece of our case. It showed knowledge of the consequences and willful indifference to safety concerns. The special election happened in late February. Patricia Montgomery was recalled by a vote of 87% to 13%. The new board, led by Bob Sanders, immediately rescinded all violations against me and issued a formal apology. But the lawsuit continued because we weren't just fighting about HOA rules anymore. We were fighting about accountability. The case went to mediation in April. The HOA's insurance company wanted to settle, offering to pay my legal fees and formally recognize an exemption for emergency equipment. But I wanted more. Patricia Montgomery needs to be held personally accountable, I told Tom. If we just let the insurance company pay and everyone moves on, nothing changes. The next HOA in the next community will do the same thing. Personal liability is hard to establish. She's protected by the business judgment rule as an HOA officer. What about the negligence that caused Derek Oak's injuries, or the endangerment of the Prather family? Tom leaned back in his chair. We'd have to prove her actions directly caused those harms. It's a tough standard, but not impossible given what we have. We rejected the settlement offer and proceeded to trial. The trial started in June, unseasonably cold for Colorado in summer. The courtroom was packed every day with residents from Mountain Ridge and surrounding communities. The case had become a referendum on HOA power and accountability. Our key witnesses were devastating. Derek Oakes testified about losing his scholarship and his athletic career. His mother described watching her son's dreams die because of preventable injuries. The Prathers testified about little Emma's close call with death. Margaret Rourke provided expert testimony about emergency response times and how delays directly correlate with injury severity. But the most impactful testimony came from Patricia Montgomery herself. Under cross-examination, Tom methodically walked her through every decision she made. The initial violation notice, the refusal to grant an exception, the escalation when I converted the shed to mobile, the final ultimatum that forced me to remove the equipment entirely. Mrs. Montgomery, you were informed that Mr. Lawson's equipment had saved 17 lives, correct? Yes. And you were informed by the county sheriff that removing this equipment would significantly delay emergency response. I was told that, yes. And you were aware that the community backs up against dangerous wilderness areas. Yes. Yet you still demanded the equipment be removed. The rules applied to everyone. Even when following those rules could result in someone's death, Patricia hesitated. That was a hypothetical. Was Derek Oak's injury hypothetical? Was Emma Prather's hypothermia hypothetical? Those were unfortunate incidents. Tom displayed the email on a screen visible to the entire courtroom. I don't care about his sob stories. Rules are rules. Mrs. Montgomery, can you explain this email to the jury? Patricia's face flushed. I was frustrated. Mr. Lawson was trying to get special treatment. Special treatment. He was trying to save lives. He was trying to avoid following the same rules everyone else follows. And you didn't care about the consequences. Your own words. I don't care about his sob stories. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Patricia had no good answer. The jury saw a woman who had prioritized power and control over human safety, and they didn't like what they saw. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They found in my favor on all counts. The HOA was ordered to permanently exempt emergency equipment from architectural guidelines and pay my legal fees. Patricia Montgomery was found personally liable for negligence and ordered to pay damages to Derek Oakes and the Prather family. But the judge went further. In his written opinion, he stated, HOA boards serve a legitimate function in maintaining community standards, but that authority is not unlimited. When enforcement of aesthetic rules creates clear dangers to life and safety, those rules must yield to common sense and basic human decency. Mrs. Montgomery's actions were not merely bad judgment, but a reckless disregard for foreseeable harm. The ruling set precedent in Colorado. Within months, the state legislature passed a law explicitly preventing HOAs from restricting emergency equipment or interfering with volunteer emergency services. They called it Emma's Law, named after Emma Prather. Patricia Montgomery filed for bankruptcy and moved out of Mountain Ridge shortly after the trial. I didn't feel good about that, exactly, but I didn't feel bad either. Actions have consequences, and she had earned hers. As for me, I kept doing what I always did. My shed went back in its place, the snowmobiles ready for the next call. The new HOA board actually thanked me for my service and asked if there was anything they could do to support the rescue operation. The following winter was busy. I responded to 11 calls, saving 4 lives directly and assisting on several others. Every time I climbed onto that snowmobile and headed into the wilderness, I thought about how close we had come to losing that capability over an aesthetic complaint. The story took on a life of its own. I got calls from HOA reform groups across the country, from emergency services organizations, from legislators in other states considering similar laws. I never wanted to be the face of HOA reform, but sometimes the story picks you. Derek Oakes recovered, though his soccer career was indeed over. He found a new passion in emergency medicine, inspired by his rescue experience, and enrolled at Colorado State to study paramedicine. He volunteers with the search and rescue team now, saying he wants to help others the way people tried to help him. Emma Prather is thriving. Her family moved out of Mountain Ridge, unable to shake the trauma of that day, but they stay in touch. Emma sends me drawings sometimes, usually of mountains and rescue snowmobiles. She wants to be a paramedic when she grows up. The lawsuit money from Patricia Montgomery went into a fund for search and rescue equipment and training. Bob Sanders helped me set up a nonprofit to support volunteer emergency responders dealing with HOA issues. We've helped 17 communities across Colorado navigate similar conflicts, and not one has ended with equipment removal. Looking back, I wonder sometimes what Patricia was thinking. Did she really believe aesthetic rules were more important than human life? Or was it about control, about asserting authority and not backing down? I'll never know. She never spoke to me after the trial, and I heard she moved to Florida to live with her sister. Mountain Ridge has changed since all this happened. The new HOA is more reasonable, more focused on actual community building than rules enforcement. We have regular emergency preparedness meetings now, and several other residents have gotten trained in wilderness first aid. The community came together in a way it never had before, united by the recognition of what we almost lost. I still live at 847 Cascade Drive, backing up against the wilderness. My equipment shed sits in the same spot it always has, painted to match my house, holding the tools that save lives. And when my phone rings at 3 in the morning with news of someone lost in the mountains, I'm rolling within 5 minutes. That's what it was always about. Not property values or aesthetic guidelines or HOA authority. Just being there when someone needs help, as fast as humanly possible. The shed that almost wasn't is still there. And so am I. Every time I look at that shed, I think about how close we came to a very different outcome. If the Prathers had been 30 minutes later calling for help, if Emma's hypothermia had progressed just a bit further, if any of a dozen things had gone slightly worse, we'd be telling a much darker story. Instead, we're telling a story about standing up for what matters, about communities finding their values, about accountability for those who abuse their authority. It's a story that started with a ridiculous HOA complaint and ended with real change. I got a letter last week from a volunteer search and rescue coordinator in Vermont. They were facing a similar HOA issue, and our case had given them the blueprint to fight back. They won their case without even going to trial. The HOA backed down once they saw the Colorado precedent. That might be Patricia Montgomery's real legacy. Not the harm she caused, but the change that harm inspired. Emma's law has been adopted in 4 states now, with 6 more considering similar legislation. Thousands of volunteer emergency responders are protected because of what happened here. Sometimes I think about calling Patricia to tell her that. To explain that her stubborn enforcement of aesthetic rules inadvertently created a national movement for emergency responder rights. But I never do. Some lessons are too painful to revisit, and I suspect she understands what happened better than anyone. My phone is ringing now. It's Margaret Rourke. There's a rescue call, hikers overdue in the high country, weather's moving in fast. I'm grabbing my gear and heading to the shed. This is what matters. This is why I fought. This is why we all fought. The shed stands ready. The equipment is prepared. And when someone needs help in those mountains behind Mountain Ridge, I'll be there in 5 minutes or less. Every single time. Because in the end, that's what community really means. Not matching paint colors or perfectly manicured lawns or enforcing rules for the sake of rules. It means being there for each other when it counts. It means prioritizing people over regulations. It means understanding that sometimes the most important thing in a neighborhood isn't how it looks, but what its people are willing to do for each other. Patricia Montgomery never understood that. But the rest of Mountain Ridge does now, and that makes all the difference.